Nope.
Thank you for catching that, Dick. So we'll just recap what we
Well,
did.
actually, Carla just came in and reminded me.
All
So,
right, good. We need Carla to keep us honest here. All right, so we took the roll. Everybody on the committee is here. We voted on the minutes, and there was an amendment to the minutes to add the people who voted on the two recommendations. Those people were Dick, Cliff, Jeff, and myself. Mariah wasn't there for the vote. And those minutes will be updated with those names and with that amendment. Everybody voted to approve the minutes except Dick, who abstained because he hadn't had a chance to review. All right, and now we're moving on to, and Jeff is taking minutes this time, and we're moving on to reviewing the BEEP analysis.
awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I was going to preamble was I wrote up the recommendation in the same sort of format I stole with pride from Cliff's, and then also a little bit of Sadafio and Sid's write up and recommendation. I wasn't sure. We kind of had a little bit of chat about both of those, and then we did the votes. I wasn't sure, since we've all seen a lot of this before, how much we wanted to like go through it all again, or if we just wanted to open it for questions. How do we want to do this one?
I mean, I was able to review it and I had some questions. I don't know if other people
Okay.
had a chance to review it as well. If everybody did review it, then I suggest we just move into questions. If they didn't, then we can kind of go through and you can voice over perhaps, Jeff.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And Cliff did have a couple that he had sent me ahead of time, that I'm happy to chat on. So
I think
awesome.
so. Yeah. Did people have an opportunity to review the document?
I did not.
But I sent it to you like a month ago, Mariah. Come on, man.
At noon, I was deep into the day.
Okay, Jeff, so
Can I skim
why
it
don't
really
you do
quick?
kind of a voiceover by
Okay.
section? I think this is really an
Yeah, sure.
encapsulation of what we talked about before. So hopefully most of the content isn't new, or there isn't a material difference in the content.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
really
highlight.
nothing. There's almost nothing new from our previous conversation. So I'll run you through it very high level, and then we can double back and do whatever we need to. So the basic gist is pretty straightforward, right? From the calls that we've had before, is that the recommendation is essentially that, the school committee and PSB, and I wrote deeply review because I felt like deeply was required there. I'm happy if there's a better word for that, but essentially just review the tuition being charged for both full and extended day programs for BEEP. And the rest of the document goes into detail that essentially puts forth these different cases where, per the analysis, we are we are not charging market value for BEEP, and we are also spending more on extended day teachers than we're bringing in revenue, and essentially just more arguments around why we need someone to go through and review this. And I stopped short and didn't say everything should be increased and here's some values that I think you should increase them to, because there are some areas where I feel like we don't have exactly everything that we would need to do that type of analysis. There's a few places where we, kind of have data from this year, but not last year. And I tried to do everything as up to date as I could, but it felt to me like, from a recommendation standpoint, that it would be better for us to say, hey, these all should be reviewed. And I think it's pretty obvious through the analysis that that the intention is that we probably should be charging more for this stuff. So that's a long-winded overview of what the summary is. I then started putting in a section of background, which was a great recommendation from Cliff. Thank you for that. That kind of gives a little bit more information. I'll probably add a little bit more to this, but it can stand on its own for the moment with what BEEP is and where it comes from. Talks a little bit about the inclusionary program and a little bit about financial aid. There's an enrollment data section that I really put together to really just give the reader more information. Some of it is purely cut and pasted out of the budget book, like the enrollment per location and the years, and then like the table number 1 includes some of the analysis and shopping that I did based on the data we got from the memo. There's really not a lot of analysis there. It's just there as background. The next section goes through the full day program. The first section under that section is the comps, where we look at the different schools. I ended up taking out the non-Brookline schools. It felt like it just wasn't a great comparison based on where parents in Brookline are going to take their kids to go to daycare. And I mean, clearly they could take them anywhere, but from a core, like apples to apples, it felt like that this cohort was a better comparison. The next section goes into a little bit of the details of the daily cost, the cost of operation, where we took a look at how much, which I believe this is the section that is attributed to the general funding for BEEP, of how much it costs, and then trying to come up with this cost per student calculation that we had talked about, again, to kind of show a comparison with how much are we charging versus how much it costs per student. And clearly, we have different types of students between the kids who are fully covered, on the students with disabilities. There are some financial aid kids, and there's obviously some tuition paying kids. So this puts that together. And then there was the full day versus half day, where BEEP has switched from from half day to full day 2 years ago. This one was a little hard to get the exacts out, because the benefits information that we got as was on aggregate, it wasn't split out per the tuition half versus the non-tuition half, which is not half, but I should say chunk. So I tried to take some of the data and come up with some ratios there that I poured into that, and adjusted a little bit for the fact that we didn't have data for this year on a piece of that, which is what all of this says here. And then ultimately what that generates is that we should have probably charged the 17,500 that was the original proposal for full day versus the 15,500 that we did. But again, laid it out so that people can take a look and see what it is in comparison to how much the increased cost was based on the increased number of FTE, and then the raise in tuition from 23-24 to then 24-25. So that's all the pieces of full day. And then there's a section in here about extended day. This one's a little bit shorter, and it really goes off of that memo that talks about the total cost of BEEP, extended day, the number of students enrolled in the tuition, and then it's just some pretty straight math to do the, hey, we are pulling in 270K in FY 25-26, and it's costing us 376. So that's it. That is all the sections, and certainly happy to chat on it or answer questions or whatever we want to do. Mariah.
Two thoughts I have for your consideration. One is to note that school committee has already voted to increase the tuition by 8% for the next 2 years anyway. So I think it would be helpful to point out that this is not a new discovery. This is something that school committee has been talking about. And so when the recommendation is that we review the tuition, we actually have reviewed the tuition already, and we've already done it on a 3-year cycle. It was last year, and we're 1 year of 3 into that implementation already. So that's one thing I would add.
Okay.
And the second thing is, would you like to, I don't think you've spoken to Margaret at all during this process, and I really think that is a missed opportunity, because I'll say for no other reason than to factually confirm that there are no problems in here. I mean, this entire analysis went off of data that's, I think, a year old at this point. So there was no new data, and a lot of things can change. If you recall, like I just said, one example is
Sure.
the tuition increase from last year to this year. We already have implemented the first of the 8% tuition increases. So I think that there could be, I don't know, but there could at least be some anecdotal or possibly more than anecdotal evidence regarding price sensitivity or other things that you might want to get some input on. That's all.
Yeah, I'd be happy to chat with her. There were like that one memo we got from Susan was fairly recent. I think it was in the fall of last year. But there's certainly
It
some
was all
data
from
that is
early last
so
spring, like about this time last year. I thought. Could be
I
wrong.
think it was just that one memo, the one that I couldn't find that I then asked you for and
But they
immediately
were all from the
found.
same time period, Jeff. They were all
But
from last midwinter, if I recall correctly. Early spring, midwinter. But
from like
anyway,
24, yeah.
yeah. I mean, again, I guess my point is that the program is going through a rapid evolution. We've gone to full day, we've adjusted prices, we've adjusted them. We adjusted them for the first time up, and then we made some adjustments. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. It might be good to just get her like a pulse check, and also again reflect that school committee has already been looking at this too.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Let me just capture
May-
all those
may I-
real quick.
May I ask what the current price is for the full day program?
16,700.
16,700. Okay.
So,
Is that after that 8% adjustment?
That's
Mariah?
after the first 8% adjustment. We
Gotcha.
voted a
Okay.
3-year cycle, 8% a year. And then there's extended day that was voted to go from 700 per month 2 years ago, 900 or last year, 900 this year, 1,100, then 1,300. So that has a much steeper cost increase.
Cliff?
yeah, so Mariah just answered my first question, which was it 8% in total or 8% per year? That's a fairly substantial increase, and I do think that the numbers probably need to be adjusted to reflect where we are today in the analysis and where, based upon these approved increases, we could forecast to be, to see whether or not the issue that we've all been looking at is forecast to still exist, and or at what level. I just think that would be the smart way to approach this. Yeah, obviously, we've got revenue assumptions we can make. We have to make assumptions about how many kids are going to be enrolled and, who's going to be in what classification. But we're going to need to make some broad assumptions about expense side and on salaries. And I'm curious to know whether or not, Mariah, you have any thoughts about the best way to do that sort of an exercise, given that it's a contract year.
In the absence of greater detail, I think you could carry forward the percentage increase of salary on the overall budget here.
Okay.
I mean, I don't
Sounds
have,
good.
I think that's probably the best source of non-granular data.
Thank you. The other broad comment I'd make about this is that I do think we need to consider who the audience is going to be and whether or not there's a lot of really good data in here. Some of it in the paper is hard to read. It's easier on the screen. So we might think about how we can fix that. But also, having spent a lot of time with this ourselves, we're probably more comfortable with
Oh, yeah.
some of this narrative than some of our compatriots are going to be, and certainly the public is going to be. And so I do believe that we need to fill this out a little bit with more explanation for those folks who are going to be reading it. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that.
So, Cliff, the background that you would like to add, is there specific pieces of that, like the background around the like extended day, for example, that we've spoken about in this subcommittee, or
Yeah, maybe it's just me in reading this and having a different style view. I just think it doesn't really introduce things and then discuss them, and then go to a conclusion. I think it assumes a base of knowledge on behalf of the reader that we all have. And I think again, I think it's wonderful. The data here is great. I'm just a little concerned that people are going to look at it and their eyes are going to glaze, because it's really just it's very data heavy, and it assumes a degree of knowledge I'm not sure is going to exist.
I think I think it's good. I'm sorry, were you still saying?
I was just going to say, people may have a completely different perspective than I do. So, it's just my view.
I think the background that's missing here, this is the background, like your background section, Jeff, is the background of BEEP, like what is BEEP versus the why are we asking this question, or why are we talking about this in this context, right? And I think that second question, the why are we discussing this here, is probably useful for context for readers.
Yeah, this section was a little tricky for me because I 100% agree with Cliff, and that after looking at this for a long time now, I just assume that everyone knows everything that I do, clearly, which isn't everything, right? But it's a lot more than I knew before I came into this. So I had, on the one hand, didn't want to go into too much detail for the same sort of reason that I wanted to get to the meat quickly. But I definitely appreciate that if you didn't really know that how BEEP worked, that it would be tough to get to that part and understand it. So
yeah,
I
you
can
probably get some
add a
additional,
little bit more. So
and then some other baseline context you could probably just get from the BEEP, their online presence around, like,
yeah, that's where I got a lot of this from anyway.
Sites and things like that. And here have been
Yeah,
a high level, a summary of some of the conversations that have happened. And I think that sort of why are we having this conversation in this document is probably what's, to me, going to be the best context for a reader of this. Although with the increases, it does change the math on this. I'm gonna do the math on my to figure out where that puts us in 3 years.
is it going up 8% every year?
Yes.
Mariah, for the next 3 school years?
For
not
2 more
including
years,
this
we
year?
already had one.
Okay.
So for 26, 20, we already implemented for 25, 26, then 26, 27, then 27, 28.
Okay, and those are all going up by 8%.
8% a year. So then at the end of that, then you would be, you'd be at 19,500, right?
Yeah. And then we could try to adjust the cost accordingly per salary increases or any other thing that we think is going to go up in the next 2 years.
And again, remember that when you're doing the full day, they're going up from 700 to 900 this year, then 1,100 a month, then 1,300. So
yeah, that one I think I have in here. That's this 9,000, 11,000,
Yes,
13,000.
exactly.
Yeah. But this
Although I
also,
don't
again,
know that there's,
you know,
oh no, I guess 30 students is right?
yeah,
Yeah,
that was what it came from the memo.
that was from
and
the memo, right?
Yeah. And that's
Okay.
assuming a flat cost of 376,000 every year.
I mean, you could also probably apply, I mean, if you're thinking about the cost multiple years out, you might need to apply an assumption around what other programs might cost in 3 years, right? Because the reality is like every program, I mean, the for-profit programs definitely, but actually
course.
in the, you know, the co-op type programs, everybody increases their costs a little bit every year because they have
That's right. Yeah.
to pay their.
It-
It
employees.
raises a philosophical question that may make its way into a recommendation or not, which is, okay, do we want to suggest that BEEP should meet the market, or do we want to suggest that BEEP should meet the market at a particular percentage discount, you know,
Yeah.
but not a wavering discount, sort of like, you know, plug, if you will.
Yeah.
So that gives the school committee, would give the school committee some guidance. It would also give consumers some degree of knowledge about what to expect.
And
I
just
know.
sort of,
that conversation, oh, I don't want to interrupt when you're done.
yeah, no, I'm just, it's clearly a conversation that it's for the school committee to decide. It's really a question of whether or not the subcommittee wants to raise the questions and make, if not recommendations, at least, you know, bring it to people's attention. Because if we're going to be at 19-ish, 19 and a half in 3 years, that's still below
Oh yeah.
the
A lot of
others
other schools.
today.
Sure. Yep.
And so it really does beg the question of where is it you're trying to get to? And we haven't really sort of talked about any of that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mariah. I have a thought on this too, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. A lot of those programs though are full year programs. So that's quite a big differentiator. But the other thing I would say is, remember that BEEP is an inclusive preschool program. So even if, like, you have to have the balanced cohort to make this work. So you can't treat it as a peer to any old private preschool you see on this list that Tom and Giselle's, you know, little kid has gone to and say, oh, well, we're gonna market ourselves against Apple Orchard, right? Like these are fundamentally different models. One is an integrated program that is provided as a public school, and some of these other programs are very different. So like, I can see it's not universal and I appreciate that, but like when we look at some of these programs, there's very different things and they have very different goals. And even if you were to say, well, the price comparison says that BEEP should be 25,000 a year. If you don't get enough neurotypical, or I'll say non-disabled peers to participate, you still need to fill the classrooms or you can't offer the special education program. So it's not just a market-based activity.
Totally understand that. You know, you're absolutely right. And so it's sort of like the price elasticity of the folks who are willing to pay and how they look at this relative to other options they have. And some of them will value that inclusive aspect of BEEP and value it heavily. But I'm not going to make a decision for any consumer. It's a really valid point. And I'm not suggesting that BEEP meet the market. I do think there just needs to be something of a philosophy when you start talking about pricing, because then you want to be consistent with what you're doing as you're moving along.
Is it the role of this subcommittee to answer that philosophical question or just to pose it?
I think, yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think that it is at a minimum helpful for us to pose that question.
Right.
Um,
Can I
and
answer
I
that a
have my
little
own
bit
opinion on
differently,
it, right?
Isabel?
But, well, yeah, I mean, just to give you context on why I think it's helpful to pose it is that if we're saying that, we think that you should look at tuition and as part of that, consider where the BEAT program wants to be priced. It's a fairly innocuous recommendation in that sense, but it is helpful to understand just philosophically, I think, for the program to be more clear on where it expects to stand. I think it would be clarifying for people.
And just in terms of Mariah's comment about needing a certain number of neurotypical individuals, students, I don't have the numbers up in front of me right now, but my recollection was there were 220 some.
Oh, we can put them in front of
Yeah.
you. There you go.
There you go.
And it's non-IEP is 224, IEP is 69. And I don't recall what the percentage has to be, but my recollection is that that there is a more than sufficient number at this point.
You're right, there is, Dick. I'm just saying that in the
Yeah.
background, if you were to price the program so high, you still end up needing to create that pure student set.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're absolutely
So
right that the program is much larger than the special education inclusive model requires.
right.
And I'm surprised that like this committee isn't looking, it hasn't said that. To me, that is a natural conclusion of the data, is that a program that is a loss leader, so to speak, like it costs more, it's theoretically revenue generating, but every student you bring in this model actually loses money.
Loses money. That's right.
Shouldn't necessarily be run larger than it needs to be unless it's achieving a societal mission. And so when we think about the goal of the program as being an inclusive preschool and possibly also offering preschool to students who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a private preschool, those to me have clear societal goals, but you haven't necessarily touched on that. Go ahead, Cliff.
But I understand what you're saying, but the assumption is that you couldn't get the same number of people at a much higher price. And
Say that again. What do you mean by?
Well, yes, okay. So let's say if you reached a point where the marginal paying student coming in was not losing money, right? You wouldn't need to get bigger. You're not trying to get bigger for the sake of getting bigger. No one's going to add students just to lose money. Or at least we shouldn't be doing that given the overall budgetary situation. But one of the reasons you went to full day, in fact, the stated logic for going to full day was because you were losing people on the wait list. And the comment really was, it's not a matter of price. It's a matter of, having someplace to park people's children, for people to park their children for.
I'm quite sure no one ever said that, but yes.
I don't know. That's kind of what I remember. That was the impetus for doing this.
People have to work, not that they want somewhere to park their children, but they need full-day childcare. Okay.
All right. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were referencing something else. Fair enough.
Parking.
No, fair enough. Okay. I lost my train of thought now. So I.
But can I build off of what you said though, Cliff? Or go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
I just don't think that part of what I feel some of what the committee overall is trying to do, both for the town and for the schools, is there are these situations where these are businesses, okay? And yeah, I get that education isn't a quote unquote business. But in this particular situation and other situations in the town, they're in revolving funds because they are essentially a business, right? And so part of what we're trying to do, I think, is as business people, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard the comments, we're not business people, right? Okay, well, as business people, part of what we're doing is an analysis and suggestions, comments, framing ideas. We all know that we're not the decision makers, but I just think it's really helpful for people to have things in context. And if you can raise money, more money, and maintain the situation that you've described, which is inclusive, and you're bringing in you've got the number of scholarship kids that you want to have, and you maintain that public good that you've talked about, I don't see why you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, so
Can I
yeah.
say my things I was going to say though when I
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
and then I have a comment.
two things. The thing that I think that is really valuable here, which Jeff, you've pulled out, and I've never managed to quite figure it out in the data myself, so I appreciate that you did, was coming up with the cost per student, because it lets us finally map against tuition. So you have 17,000, I think, and change, which is really helpful to see. Right?
Yep.
Like, okay, if that's where we're aiming for, and of course every year that'll change, but also looking at the tuition, right? So this was really, I thought, valuable to see that kind of analysis. So so that I think is really good. And, do we fully cover that cost? Cliff brought up the point of the revolving funds in rec department. And actually, if you look at the budget book, the revolving funds do not fully cover the cost of their programs. The different programs are subsidized at different levels based on their version of public good. It's what it says in the budget book, Cliff. It does. No? Okay. You're on mute, so I
You're
can't
muted, Cliff.
You're still on mute.
Sorry. There's one reason why the rec department does not cover all its costs, and that is the pool. Okay, that's been made clear ever since I've been on advisory, that they cannot generate enough money from the pool to
But
cover
some of the programs are
costs.
subsidized, is my point. Their programs don't all cover their own costs. They are subsidized from other programs, is what they say. My point is only that we can make a choice and say, should these programs, like, if this is the fully loaded cost, do we think the tuition should be there? And can the program be smaller? But I do think that this particular number that you've come up with, Jeff, is helpful for school committee to start to look at, like, this, if this is the true cost per student, that's really helpful to understand. And just thinking generally about, like, what should the program actually achieve? And so to the extent that this is making a recommendation for the school committee to, right size tuition and right size the program to achieve their goals, as opposed to growth for the sake of growth, or running the program at the same size for the sake of keeping it at the same size. Like, there's nothing holy about the current size of BEEP, right? And so I think that those are things to perhaps bring out in your recommendation.
So I mean, so in the first version, of the document, I think that Jeff, you had shared, you had actually said, do we need BEEP to be this big, right? So you'd put that question.
That was a long time ago in my knowledge.
That was a long time ago.
I've learned so much since then.
And I wonder if, I guess I'm not convinced that we need to include that in the recommendations, because I think that there is a question, these things are intertwined, right? Because there's a question about, do you want to charge market? Do you want to charge below market? What is the purpose in the community? And those things will be related, right? I don't know that I have a personal opinion on this. I don't think you should charge what a Bright Horizons could charge, because those are very expensive, and this is a public preschool program. But that is an opinion. And I think that to the extent that there is a demand, right? So this came up also around the demand. There was a question around wait lists, for example. To the extent that there is demand in the town, increasing the size, if it can get to a sustainable cost structure, or we're not running in at more of a loss, for lack of a better term, or if that's something that fits into the budget, right? These things are all intertwined and need to be considered in holistically with all of the levers. So I'm not comfortable with a recommendation that says we should limit the size of BEEP, because if there is a need in the town for people to have full day daycare for their children or preschool for their kids, and that provides a service to the town, and it can be workable financially, which we have missing data in this document, so we don't really have the information to triangulate on what it would make it workable. And I think workable is subjective, right? So there's a lot of questions around that. I don't see it why we would not do that. So I mean, it's an interesting question, and it was something that Jeff raised in the conversation we had a month ago, or whenever it was, 2 months ago, was that if there is demand, why wouldn't we offer this service if we can do that financially? And I think the big question is, what would that look like? What would be the tuition that you charge? Do we expect to charge market rates or not, right? It all sort of hinges on that. Then there's a question about how big would it be or not be. And there's probably, umpteen scenarios that you could run to determine what is optimal given all of those variables.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. So I had many of the things we just discussed have crossed my mind in the last couple of months. Obviously, as I've written it, I stayed away from the philosophical piece. I stayed away from we should charge market, because I did think about that. And I decided to try to go more with, here's the data and observations about how it really just feels like, even with the increases that we're doing, and I'm happy to plug in the 8% for the next couple of years and make an assumption on what we think the costs will be. But I decided to go in the other direction as far as saying we should do, hey, BEEP is a great service, so, we should not take a loss but break even, or hey, BEEP is a business and we need money right now. That's clearly why we're having all these discussions. And if we've got a way where we can make $100,000 and people are going to pay it, and it keeps the quality of the program and all of it, what it's delivering, why wouldn't we take that $100,000, right? Like, otherwise we're going to have to raise taxes to cover the $100,000. So, but I felt like, especially from the conversations we've had, and I know there's different opinions on the subcommittee, that laying out the data and giving some models for, hey, think about it like this, would be a better recommendation than the others. I think if we do the others, we're probably going to end up with some split votes, which is fine as well. But I wanted to have that discussion with the committee, the subcommittee, to decide how we wanted to do it. Because I definitely see the, should we charge market is something we could say, like, do we recommend that or not recommend that, or whatever we want to put in for market. And then also, the sort of size of BEEP, if we felt like it should just be the minimum size, or again, they're all interrelated, right? Because it really depends on, are we breaking even or not. But I didn't go that direction, but I'm interested to see what you guys want to do there.
I guess that let's assume that we say, let's charge market, or let's not charge market. Let's expand, or let's not expand. Do we have, if we turn that into a recommendation, do we have any idea of what the price elasticity, what the sensitivity of the market would be to an increase in price? What the sense, what sort of rates you'd have to charge to expand, how much you'd have to lower your rates to get more students
Sure.
into the program. And the school committee, I think, is going to have those same questions. I mean, I guess the only way would be
You know what
to try.
elasticity is you raise the price to see what happens, right?
You do
Yeah.
have a wait
So-
list. You do have a wait list.
Do we have a wait list now that is substantial?
As
Jeff,
far as I
Brian?
know, there is not a wait. Well, it depends on the site because I believe that there are sites that have availability. Margaret always says like she could fill multiple additional classrooms at Runkle than she could at, for example, Putterham.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So maybe you charge higher rates at Runkle.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's more.
That was a joke.
Yeah,
I
no.
like it.
But I
But
guess
it-
the question that we talked about, what is the role of this committee? I think you said earlier, Dick, and I thought the role of the committee is to evaluate the override request. So really this is staying on the financial side of this whole thing, right? And so to the extent that this is a lever to consider in all the different budget inputs, revenue inputs, isn't that what this committee is weighing in on?
That is the focus of the committee. I think that's the value that this committee can bring.
So to the extent that this report can make clear what the sort of cost per student is right now and a model for considering that going forward and putting that the ultimate tuition amount, considering the tuition amount within that context. And as you said, Sadaf, a lot of the things about right sizing the program, around some of this, I think that might be really helpful for school committee to have as a recommendation.
Yeah, and I would say also that if there is a substantial waiting list, or if there's not, that information I think would be pertinent
Yeah.
to consideration of where the school committee might want to go.
I mean, I think ideally, and I don't think we have all of the data to be able to say this, and I feel like a bit of a broken record here, but I think ideally our recommendation would be that the goal of the program would be to break even financially, right? To be self-funding in some way, ideally. And, that means that some, certain students are subsidizing other students, and that's okay. That's the way universities work. This isn't the only educational model where that's the way that it looks. Or that you reduce the gap between the revenues and the costs in some way. And that's why I think the break-even number is helpful, because the cost per student I think is helpful, but it doesn't tell you what you would need to charge students who are paying. And I know that there's some ambiguity in the data because people are getting partial financial aid and things like that. So if we don't have the data, then there could be an overarching recommendation around, we think it would be helpful to get as close to break even as possible. And the levers are going to be around either the tuition you charge plus the size of the program. And these are the inputs into the market, and putting that in an apples to apples view, which Jeff, I know you tried to do on the hourly data. But the annual number is, I think, still apples to oranges, as Mariah had cited, which is which then is confusing. So just probably worth calling out in the table. And we could go down a path like that, for example.
The one issue with the hourly information though is that people can't enroll by the hour, and so when you start looking at using that as the comparator, that's really not relevant because it's not the way people can.
Well, the reason I said that is useful data, my recommendation, and perhaps it wasn't clear, was to use the hourly data to come up with what you think what the market rate is, versus the annual tuition rate. So we said that market rate is $6 more per hour. So if we were to add $6 per hour, for example, like what would that mean for BEEP tuition? backing into it that way. You're right. People can't enroll per hour, but it gives you more of an apples to apples comparison.
Jeff, the cost information you have, is that revolving fund data, or is that the general fund data?
It's general fund data. And that was the part where I was saying earlier that I have the top piece is just straight data without the benefits, and then the bottom is with the benefits. But what I tried to do was approximate the percentage of benefits that was going to the general fund, because the number I have is only blended. It's just the total benefits for the entire program across both the revolving side, the tuition paying side, and the general fund. So that number clearly, and that was my whole setup about how there's a bunch of crazy gobbledygook. Where did I actually put it in here to sort of explain what I did there? That one's a bridge too far for me. I would need someone on the school side to really say that, because I think that starts to get into the individual educators that are split between the two cohorts, or again, like how exactly that works. But I tried my best to say this is a percentage that would be allocated here, and then this would go to the revolving. So this is just the general fund side, because that's the data that I had for the individual educators from the budget book.
So then I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. I mean, so then this number, right, the 5 million in FY in school year in FY26 essentially is not the full cost. Is that what you're saying?
Of the entire BEEP? The entire BEEP cost. That was from the other memo. It is more like this 9.5, but again, this is the information we got from Susan that talks about all in estimated BEEP costs, right? But this has the operating budget, so the inclusionary program, it's got the revolver, but then it also includes these grants. So I'm not sure how the grants are costs. I think the grants are more revenue, but I think this is meant to be like, these are all the funds that are used to pay for BEEP. And so hence we're paying $9.5 million for BEEP. But I wouldn't, again, like getting the exact cost for each of the individual pieces, that came out of the budget book, but it doesn't include everything because it's not broken down like I was saying, the benefits number is just this blended number. I don't know which pieces that's allocated to. There also isn't like the tiniest detail for something along the lines of even the revolver. There's reference in the documentation that the revolver is used to include some of the inclusionary program or materials and other things. So there's some blending of these numbers that is just it's just a little too far. I would either need some additional data to figure that out, or have somebody do that math and give it to us. So
I'm a little confused. So everyone who's on an IEP, that they're covered by the general fund, right?
that's my assumption, yes.
That's
Okay.
that's not necessarily true. If you look at your table you have, Jeff, there's IEP with tuition. So there are some categories.
Oh, that's right. There are a couple that pay some portion of tuition.
Right. Okay. Yep. So fair point. Where I'm going with is that looking at the cost per student in the general fund, those are the students we're obligated to take care of. And when we're talking about revenue, aren't we really looking at what's going on in the revolving fund?
Yes, that is true. The analysis that I was thinking there was that it was essentially the same. It was the same cost if you went across both, because if you look at the table that has, did I put it in here? The one that's got, no, hold on a second. I might have it back in the spreadsheet. This one, where it talks about all the different staff and all the different, the special ed and the early childhood, and then it breaks it out by teachers and by paras. I made an assumption there that teachers were teachers and paras were paras, and that essentially I was using the counts. And this is also how I came up with the percentage of how many how much we were going to allocate for benefits for the revolving / tuition side or the general / IEP side.
Right.
And since I had all of these numbers, I used those to come up with, I mean, this is the same chart from the document. It just has all the math under it.
Right. So with the revolving funds, this is kind of we don't really need to get into it, but with revolving funds, the town, and I think the schools also find ways to shift certain costs into the revolving funds to take care of overhead and you've got the benefits, but and that's something it's a refinement of this, but yes. I understand what you did, so I appreciate the explanation.
Sure.
So there is, I mean, just so I understand, there at least a subset of the costs in the revolving fund that should be in here, right? That are incremental costs that are in.
There's a reference to it, but I have no idea what it is or how big it is.
Okay, so that's all I was getting at. And I get that, like, a fully loaded cost against all of the overhead and the building space and all that stuff, like, doesn't make sense necessarily in this context. But it seems like a subset of that might.
Yeah, because that's one of the benefits of a revolving fund.
Yeah.
So I guess then the cost per student is low. So Mariah had said that number would be helpful to the school committee, and I think based on what we just discussed, that is not the real cost per student of VEEP.
Yeah.
It's estimated, right? I mean, it's estimated as good as I could come up with it with the data at the end.
So certainly not the cost that you're legally allowed to carry in the revolving fund. And I don't know how to estimate what they do or replicate what they do on the town side.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation to have either with Susan or with Melissa or Lincoln, maybe, I don't know, one of the folks, just to understand the process they go through.
And so I think, so to build on that a little bit, to the extent that we publish in the report this number, the cost per student, the 17.5, I think you have to do it with the caveats.
Oh yeah, I mean that was that whole bit I was telling you that goes into how what I made is estimates and assumptions and that sort of thing.
I just want to be
Could I ask Sadaf, when you say that cost is too low, can you identify specific elements that Jeff should highlight that in your mind make that cost too low? What is not included there?
Well, I think if you go back to the spreadsheet, and I don't think we have the spreadsheet. Is that right, Jeff? Because I
Which one?
Like your BEEP analysis Excel here that you have open, your spreadsheet.
Oh, you guys don't have it. Yeah, I have it, but
yeah.
I've sent like little pieces to you guys over time, but I didn't share it because I didn't want any open meeting law, like we're not all supposed to be in there doing stuff together and we have a quorum and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm happy to send you guys all the data, or if you want to get together and meet and run some numbers or do whatever, or however you want to do that.
I'm not a masochist, Jeff. I'm just.
I assume, Dick, after this meeting, you'd want to get together and run some scenarios.
No, I'm just curious. What you say, Sadaf, that this doesn't include all the costs.
I think
I would
she's
think-
referring to this bit, right?
All I'm saying is that it would probably be wise to say, because we need to include the following, which aren't included, even though we can't quantify them. We can't just, rather than saying it's not the full cost, but to
Yeah.
at least highlight what might be missing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I was referring to this, right? So the total cost
Yep.
of is 9 million. We're basically we're using that, I think, 4 million number largely.
Yep. Plus that fraction of benefits that I gave.
Yeah, you
got
did
it,
take
you know.
that
Oh,
portion.
yes,
of
you're right.
benefit,
Right. But
Yeah,
it
that
doesn't
was-
include these two.
Which
Because it's just hard to figure
that's
out.
another
I would not
600.
consider the grants at all because of the way that they're structured. They're not part of the core program. They literally are like, for example, community-based preschool activities. So they don't,
Okay.
yeah. I don't know if all of them are, but at least one of them. I think there's only two, I'm pretty sure, and only one, and one of them is that. So again, it's just like not material to the overall arc of the conversation.
So if it's 60%, 65%, give or take, it would be of that 781,000, or
You mean the benefits piece that I chunked out?
the
Or-
benefits you've already.
I did
included
chunk that out. Yep.
percentage. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, this
I'm
part, if someone had a swag for that, I can plug it in, but I just didn't know what to do with that one as far as trying to, and I'm again not sure if that's I was thinking of this in sort of a fixed cost, variable cost modeling standpoint where, you know, there's just pieces that are part of the program. And, you know, again, like some of the stuff that Mariah was just mentioning with the grants. And then there was as we added a student and then we need to add teachers and paras, you know, then it follows itself up. And it was that chunk that really, like, what does it cost for an additional student that I was trying to come up with in that calculation.
Got it. So I think it's just worth it citing what it does not include.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I
It's-
can plug
it's
that in there.
effective. I think that's
Yep.
well. Yeah. All right. Okay, so going back to this idea of what we want to do as a recommendation. So do people have additional feedback on this so that Jeff can converge on something? Because there was a lot of stuff that was tossed out. And I think it's important for us to narrow down where we want to take this. From my point of view, this is a financial exercise. And so I don't think it is for this committee to weigh in on what the purpose of the program should be, or whether, you know, who you include or don't include, et cetera. And to go into those details, given the genesis of the program, the purpose of the program to start with, and the size of the program. But I do think it's helpful to say that this is what it costs. This is the gap between costs and revenues, and you know, the levers are scale the program, the tuition, and there's potentially some upside from a market standpoint. And our recommendation is that, you know, that you consider an evaluation of the financials, the tuition, you know, maybe of the tuition. If we want to be explicit about that, I think that's worth including. And size is a potential lever. But I think we have to converge on something. So that Jeff, in your next turn,
Or we can
committee on like where we want to take this at, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like I said, a financial, as we talked about, a financial exercise.
Yeah.
Other opinions on this? Cliff, you have no opinion on this?
Yeah, no,
It's a tricky one.
I've given all my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Dick, any other feedback from you?
No, I think we are looking at the viability of increased revenue, increased tuition, and you've outlined that there are certain legal requirements that we have to meet. And that's the background for against which this program exists. And beyond that, there is a revenue opportunity. So.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Jeff,
Yeah,
does
and
that make sense to you? Are you?
Yeah, I mean, it was just sort of that same piece we were just talking about, right? It was kind of this number 3 from the charge,
Yeah.
determine if there's other sources of funding beyond or in addition to an operating override that can close the structural budget gap. So to me, it's just that very simple question, right? If we thought that it made sense for us to try to increase revenues for the town by increasing tuition beyond the break even or whatever, wherever we want to call it, that could directly impact this charge number 3 of saying, here's a way that we can do that without doing it. If we feel that, at the end of the day, that this is a service and that it shouldn't be something that we're making a profit on, et cetera, I've tended to come down on the side of I'd rather have it be as much data and analysis as we can, and then have other groups, come up with that argument or decide on that argument. But that's really what I think it comes down to.
Well, I think in that context, what we're ultimately talking about here is narrowing a deficit as opposed to going and making a profit, right?
That's fair enough. You can look at it that way too.
Yeah. And it's not really for the town. It's ultimately for the town, but it's to help the schools get revenue, and then for the town and the taxpayers to have to deal with an otherwise larger override.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
May I just add
Please.
one comment that is bedeviling me throughout this process, and that is that whatever override the select board settles on has to be something that's acceptable to the voters. So if there is potential quote unquote profit in a program that does not undermine a purpose of that program, it is something that I think should not be rejected out of hand, because we are in all of this trying to reduce the amount of that override to something that will be palatable.
So Dick, I appreciate your comment. I agree that we want to reduce the size of a potential override. The question that I had is that if this program does turn a profit, are there implications to that? Other implications if it's
I don't know that
considered a for-profit program or
certainly there are certainly recreation programs that do individual programs that do turn a profit.
Okay, that's
subsidize other programs.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, that's fair. I wasn't sure what the implication was to that, given a comment that Bella had made in a prior meeting around around out of district students. Cliff, go ahead, and then Maria.
I was just going to say, look, revolving funds generally, you're limited to collecting revenue based upon the costs, right? And Dick, I don't know if you're talking about the entire rec revolving fund where individual programs may. So that's, but as a total organization, they're not quote unquote making a profit. So I honestly don't think that profitability is an issue in this particular situation, just because of the nature of what the overall program is. I just don't think we should be using that word in our conversations.
Mariah, did you have any thoughts on the recommendation based on what we talked about?
Well, as I understand it, I mean, are you going to try and vote a recommendation tonight, or is this going to be revised again?
I think it needs to be revised. I
Okay.
don't think that, yeah, I think we need to respond to something that's written down that we can agree to.
As I understand the conversation as it's gone, I think it generally makes sense to me. Again, I would just suggest, Jeff, that like we get a sanity check on this
Sure.
so that the committee is not recommending something that's wildly wrong.
I 100% agree.
That's a good
And
goal.
while I love this cost per student, what worries me is it makes sense to me, but I worry that like, you know, when you're in your head thinking, is this right? Am I missing something? Is there a reason that this math cannot math the way I'm thinking it does? And so I agree with some of the conversations that we're trying to compare like this is comparing revolving fund versus operating. I just don't know. So again, I want to make sure that the committee's work is robust.
Totally understand. And that this beef adventure has been super eye-opening, and it's very interesting. You know, there's just not a lot of programs like this in the town. So, you know, I've enjoyed going through it, and I will never ever volunteer to research beef ever again.
Noted. Add that to the minutes. All right. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you
All
all
right,
for your feedback.
So, Dick, I think, oh, actually, I'm sorry, Mariah, let's talk, we have teaching loads next. So let's go to you next for teaching loads.
Sure. Do you want me to pull it up on my screen or just talk about it?
It was shared, so hopefully people had an opportunity to look at the teaching loads document.
And I emailed it to everyone beforehand. So let me just get to it. So two things. One is I updated the prior document. So I gave you 5 pages, I think. Just notably here, let me share my screen. Let me not torture people who didn't get the stuff. One moment. Oh, share. Can you see?
Not yet.
It's coming
Okay.
soon.
There
There it is.
Okay, so this was the prior document we looked at 3 weeks ago or so. 2 changes. One is I scratched out advisory because I subsequently learned that is a community duty, it is not part of the 4+1. And I put a footnote here on non-contractual because the 4+1 is not in the contract, but there is text in the contract that does have to do with workloads. So I added those quotes in. So the first one about the 115 students, and then the second one about the instructional periods per week. And the other assigned duties, one of which may be a home run, etc. So that's something we all talked about, but I did say I would update the document so that we had the best latest content, and so that is there. Then
And so actually one question about that, or you can finish walking through it. I have a question about the footnote when you're ready.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, the way that this reads, maximum of 20 assigned instructional periods and 4 periods of other duties. I mean, does this not map to essentially to 4+1? Is that just used as shorthand? Or, I mean, how many periods a week is a typical class at BHS? At 4? Is it still 4?
Yes, they are still 4.
Got it. So this could be theoretically 5 classes.
Except again, I'm a little unclear, and as you'll see later on, there's a little bit of conversation of which of these wordings are predate the 4+1 model.
Okay.
And you haven't been around for the past 5 years at the high school, but the number of instructional periods for those of us who have been parents of students at the high school for the past 5 years, the number of instructional periods has varied wildly, like year to year, due to COVID and other changes. So I just don't know how that maps against that, but it's in the
periods per course, meaning periods per course, or
periods in the week. Like a block would be like a block on Monday would be an instructional period.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, but like for a while they were doing 7 blocks over 10 days instead of 8 blocks over 10 days, but they were longer and like it was all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so going back, this is the new part. So the 2 things I requested were what the +1 component consists of, and then 2, how workload compares to the 115 students in the contract. Again, I just quoted that same language that we had, that I'd referred to in the footnote above. So the +1 assignments of full-time staff in math, science, social studies, and world language are, you can see them here. So the significant majority is tutorial, but you can see some of the other programmatic areas that people work in. And then a clarification, again, the advisory is not a +1 assignment, community duty, not part of the teaching load. Then the average of student load data is shown on the next page. I'll go there in a minute, for all 5 core academic subjects, not just the 3 that were referenced in the contract. So if you note, these totals do not include their +1 assignment. And this was a comment which I thought was sharing, if their PSB ended +1, there would be many teachers over the 115. And that the language in the contract on 115 apparently predates when the 4+1 model was adopted. That's how I understood this. So here is the data that is shown, and then there's averages for English, math, science, social studies, and world language provided at the bottom. So each person you see here is an anonymized full-time staff member, and you see the number of students in their total course load.
This is super helpful.
Do we know what the numbers are for the other academic subjects?
Well, those are things like career and technical education, performing arts. They're just like completely different. They're not like the academic subjects.
So math, science, social studies, and world language. I mean,
And English.
And English exhausts the academic subjects.
As far as I can, am I missing any? I think that's it.
And does this does the model, the teaching load model apply to all teachers, or just, I just want to make sure I understand. It says educator in their area of instruction. So it applies to everybody, whether you teach art or whether you teach English.
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I know you listed the academic subjects here, but I'm wondering if, I assume that the teaching loads applies to all teachers, even if they're teaching a non-academic subject like fine arts.
Well, you may be treading on when you call it non-academic.
Sorry, you not.
So,
Yeah, okay. I know
so
that was a poor,
just to
poor term.
take an example, if somebody is a drama coach or an art teacher,
That's
is your question, Sadaf, whether they also are subject to the 4+1?
That's right.
That is a good question, and I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think so, but I would have to double check, triple check.
And I have one more question around advisory. So you said that this is a community duty and not part of the teaching load. And so it is just something incremental. And because I don't have kids at BHS, I don't have a good appreciation for what advisory looks like. Is it a full period? Is it just like,
so it,
office
like,
hours?
remember when we were at the high school and they had homerooms?
Yeah.
Okay, so but you remember how you used to have homeroom like every day? Or
we
like,
did not have homeroom
or
every day.
like 4 days a week or something? Didn't we have it most days of the week?
We went like once a week or something.
Oh, okay. I remember it was like some amount for like 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
It's like that, but more robust, and it has a socio-emotional, like a community building component to it, much
I
more
see.
than what we did for homeroom back in the day when it was like handing out announcements.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
So, and it meets, they just changed the schedule this year, so I think it still meets every week. Jeff, does it still meet every week?
Oh, hold on. I think I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. So,
I think advisory
I
still meets every week. It's X block that
think-
switched to every other week, right?
yes, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what is tutorial generally? What shape does that take?
So it's like, imagine it's like a homeroom. It's a group of students who get together with a teacher, and there's some sort of community building activity that happens in the, or you said, wait, I'm sorry, which one did you say? I'm sorry.
Tutorial.
He said tutorial.
Oh,
Yeah.
tutorial. So tutorial, now I'm getting all my terms confused. Tutorial is essentially executive functioning support. for students. And so it is a highly supportive environment where students who need additional support to keep on top of their work get guided by, I think it's typically 2 teachers for a group of students.
And is that just my experience as a tutor was I would tutor math. Is the tutorial is it focused on math or science or French or whatever, or is it a more general, non-academically focused, or not focusing on one academic discipline? You know?
It's not focusing on one. It's not like you're in tutorial for math and you're going for tutoring. There's like homework centers
Okay.
and stuff like that for that sort of, or I'll say like tutoring
Okay.
centers for that. This is really like, are you on top of things? It might be like, in my recollection as a parent, what I was hearing was like, it's like light academic support, but you might have a Spanish teacher and an English teacher, so they're going to be able to maybe help you a little bit with your math, but really it's about the executive functioning
Okay.
coaching to keep on top of things.
And how often do kids have a tutorial?
It's a
Do they
block,
have it
like it's a regular class, so to speak.
every day
Well, not every day, but as often as the block meets,
or
4 times a week-ish.
okay?
I'm talking a little bit out of turn because that's my experience as a parent, but I'm sure I could be missing like key program elements that I should be talking about. I just don't know all of the ins and outs of how all the programs work.
So I found this data to be really helpful. So thank you, Mariah, especially the distribution on the last page.
Yeah.
Across
Sure.
these core.
Thank you.
And thanks to Hal Mason who assembled it.
It's really helpful. And then the clarification around the contractual piece of 4+1 was helpful as well. Thank you for that. All right. Any questions from the rest of the group on this?
I have like, I can't stay that much longer.
Okay.
Is
Okay.
it possible? Do you mind if we jump to the FTE bit? And can I just make one comment about the salary thing? I can probably listen from my phone. I just can't stay at my computer much longer.
Yep, that's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so the next thing was, I'm sorry, let me scroll to it. Sorry, the facilities data is long. I'm just trying to scroll to the right spot. Oh, okay, I went too far. Okay. So there was a question about FTE because I had explained at one point that not all the staff are full-time because depending, you would not necessarily have, like, if you don't need to, you would not have you would not have a 1.0 staff if you don't need that. So you can see the breakdown. And you can see that the vast majority of staff, like 95+% or so, are 1.0s. But there are 69 of the 1,462 who are less than 1.0. Of those 65, 4 of them are not benefits eligible, but 65 are, and of those 35 are on insurance, which is just under 54%.
Thank you.
And then last thing I wanted to say was I got the chance only briefly to look at some of the documents earlier, but I want to make sure that the subcommittee is aware that for the analysis of the salary growth, that was presented, a lot of the staff are not like you cannot take the averages of the steps because people are not evenly distributed among the steps. In fact, just under half of all PSB staff are at the top step, so they do not get the step jump. They are only getting the COLA increase. There is no step for them. So
Right.
when you look at that, it actually changes, like understanding the distribution of staff among the steps is very different as you balance that against the number of the steps and the incremental growth for further down on the steps.
Right.
So while some of the staff, if you look, some of the steps are up at, I think you had an average of, I don't remember, 6 or 8%, Dick, but again, just under 50% are getting just the 2 3/4%, which is below the inflation rate you presented.
Okay. Yeah, I think Susan gave us a 48%, 52% figure.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
I'm going to switch to my phone then if
Yeah.
it's okay.
So any questions for Mariah since she's going to be doing other things? Even if she's still on the call. All right.
I might
You, Mar-
be switching to phone as well here in just a few, just to let you know.
Okay. All right. So shifting gears, Dick, I'm going to hand it over to you to cover your 2 documents.
Yeah, very, very quickly. The documents are relatively short and I think I hope somewhat self-explanatory. The medical premium document focuses on the 83%, 17% split between the employer contribution and the employee contribution, which is has been identified as one of the budget busters and is very costly. The document compares it to the communities that, or the school districts that have been identified as similar in a memo that we received early on from Sarah Mokhtar and Jesse Hefter, and does a back of the envelope or in a table at some detail, I guess, analysis of what the savings would be if we were at a level, a contribution level, an employer contribution level that was more in line with the similar communities. And it does that in a couple of ways. One is it applies different rates to HMOs and health maintenance organizations on the one hand, and PPOs and TOS programs on the other, with a higher rate for the former and a lower rate for the latter. And the other analysis simply reduces the contribution rate from 83% to 75% and calculates what the savings would be if that happened. There are 2 gaps in this that I am aware of at this point. Number one is I need data for Chelmsford, which was one of the similar communities, and I could not find what their contribution rate was online. And I was going to call them today, and I completely forgot to do that. And the other is there is a discrepancy of a couple of $1 million between the benefit figure of 41 million that is provided in the set forth in the forecast that was provided to the select board, and the 39 million that comes from this analysis, which takes the actual numbers and builds up from that. And there may be some other benefits that are included. I've sent an email to Melissa and Charlie Young, and I may have made a mistake that or there may be some other a benefit that's lurking there, or the forecast may be a budget figure as opposed to an actual figure. So I'm going to try to pin that down. But essentially, this is the process is to see where we would be if we were looking at contribution rates that are more in line with that of the similar communities. And it is, I think, something for the select board to consider as they are considering the override amount, whether they should be building in the 8317 assumption or a lower assumption going forward.
All right. I had some comments, but I wanted to just open up to other people for comments, questions.
I have a question about the salaries. Just so I make sure that I'm reading this correctly.
That's the other one. We're talking benefits,
Oh,
right?
all right.
Happy to get into this.
Yeah, to talk about.
So I'll go ahead then with my comments. Thank you, Dick, for putting this together. It's again incredibly helpful to see the numbers and the analysis. Just one small typo. I believe in section 2 in the first sentence, it says been identified. And I think you're missing a word like has is probably
Okay.
belongs in there. But my primary piece of feedback or question around this is really about whether proposed override could assume that the contribution rate is different. And I think this is an important thing for us to push on. And the real question that I have is practically, when is it viable to make a change, given the complexities of making a change? And so I like the idea of making this type of recommendation, and I want to make a recommendation that is on a timeline that is rational. Even though it might not be easy to get there one way or another. I get that. I think we've heard that multiple times. I can appreciate that. I think oftentimes things that are important to do are not easy. So I don't take that as a statement about whether this is something we pursue or not. But I do want to consider pragmatically what it would take when any cost savings would take effect, and consider that in the context of a recommendation.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do in one of these, and it may be in this, it may be in the other document. Assume that I don't assume that this would take place at the beginning of FY27. I mean, the numbers are there. One possibility would be for the override amount to assume that negotiations could focus on this issue, and you would be looking at the middle of FY27. You would be looking at FY28, FY29. I mean, there are various assumptions that could be made in terms of the impact of a reduced employer contribution rate and when it would take effect. And it's an entirely fair point to bring up, and one that I do allude to it at some point in one of these two documents.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Other feedback on the recommendation that's in here? Mariah, if you're still there and able to participate, I'd love to hear your input. I know that you had some concerns about this when we talked about this the first time around, which has been 3 months now, maybe.
I mean, I still think that, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I still think that well, you just brought up the point, really. It's about balancing a feasibility against this. And my concern is, and I'll just re-express it, that if you do not fund insurance or benefits to the level that they are currently, and they don't manage to negotiate in the timeline that's envisioned, what we have is a cut in services, and we have taxpayers who are frustrated because they were told that they would get a continuity of services that they don't receive. So it has to be done properly.
All right, thank you.
And I will say that the concern that I have is that, and we have not seen the assumptions that have been built in yet in detail, but if you're building in an 17% assumption in the forecast and the override is based on that, then that's something we're going to be dealing with for the next 3 years at a cost of millions of dollars. So.
All right. Jeff, I don't know if you're still able to talk while you're on the phone.
Yep, I'm just moving around because I gotta go pick somebody up and then I'll come back.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to comment in case we were going to lose you.
Yep, no, I'm still here. I'm just gonna run over and do the pickup and then come back, but I'll be on the phone the whole time.
Okay. All right. Other comments on the recommendation, or are we ready to discuss voting and bringing this to the broader committee?
Is the recommendation on salaries going to incorporate the fact that 48% of staff don't actually?
I will
Okay.
incorporate that. Yes.
Yeah. So right now
Thank
we're
you.
just talking about the benefits.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were talking about both of them.
No, but I will incorporate that.
All right, so let's take a vote on the healthcare coverage specifically. I want to make sure we talk about each of these separately. So, I am comfortable with this recommendation as long as we include the timeline considerations that I mentioned. So with that addition or refinement of the recommendation, I would propose that we accept this as a committee.
I'll second it.
All right, so let's take a vote. Dick,
Yes.
Cliff,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes,
Mariah.
I'm going to abstain given my role on the committee.
Okay. And I also vote yes. All right, great. So, Dick, I'd love to share this at the broader committee meeting on the 11th for discussion. I think still have a week and change.
And that is fine. I will make that. I've made a note to explicitly incorporate that timeline consideration, and I will fly it past you to make sure that it captures your concern.
Okay,
Your thought.
great. Thank
Good.
you. And I just want to make sure that everybody has time to read the documents, so when we get to the broader committee meeting, people are prepared to vote. And I think we probably don't have that time for this Wednesday meeting. So thank you. All right. So moving on to the next document on salaries.
And this looks at a couple of issues. One is the impact of steps where, and this, Cliff, to respond to your question, an individual who is in the step and lane grid from year to year moves up from one step to another, and that step from one year to another is so step two is for example, step 2 in fiscal year 26 is 2.75% greater than step 2 was in fiscal year 25. So you get the benefit of the cost of living increase that is built into the table, as well as the benefit of a step. And I will work in the comment of Susan that 48% of people are not on the step, 52% are on the grid.
So what so what happens from year 2 to year 3?
So from year 2 to year 3, if I have a bachelor's degree and I am I'm on step 2.
Same lane, right?
I move to step 3 next year.
Right, but so we don't.
And that step is also 2.75%. If it was last year to this year, it's 2.75% greater than step 3 would have been this year.
Okay, so that the step beyond these large steps that you have in the chart, the intermediate steps are just the 2.75, right?
No. They are there is a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7, and so forth. There are a series of steps, and then at the end of that grid, there are other provisions that apply, which I don't address here.
All right, so let me explain why I'm asking this the way I'm asking. I'm trying to understand, and maybe it can't be done. If someone starts today, all right,
Right.
and they're here for 15 years in the same lane, is there any way to forecast what their year 15 income is going to be?
Not that I know of.
Putting aside, let's assume that there's no change, if you will, in collective bargaining that's going to sort of make a difference. You've got what you have right now. All right, so let's assume that framework stays the same. Is there any way for us to calculate what the total increase over that time period is going to be for someone?
I don't believe so, because you don't know what COLA increase will be negotiated from year to year that will impact the step level. You could go back
Assume the
15
same.
years. You could go back 15 years,
Huh?
10 years, and say, okay, I was at step 1 10 years ago. Then I went to step 2 9 years ago, and that step 2 would give you a figure. And then I went to step 3 8 years ago, and that would give you a figure. Each of those step values, the dollars associated with each of those steps, would have been determined by the collective bargaining that set those grids for each of the applicable contracts. But you don't know what that will be for the future.
I understand that, but you can make assumptions, right? You could do an analysis that's similar to the one you just described, which is just to say coal is not going to change, and steps are not going to change. I'm trying to understand, and maybe going backwards is the way to do it, what someone's, for lack of a better term, compound rate of growth in wages would have been or would be, given if they stayed in their lane for that time period, and put that in the context of inflation.
Well, going forward, you would have to assume a percentage increase. For example, step 2 this year is worth more than step 2 was last year. And last year, step 2 was worth more than it was 2 years ago. So because the value of the step went up by an assumed cost of living adjustment each year. And that unfortunately, that I mean, for the purpose of your analysis, that cost of living adjustment is negotiated and actually varies from year to year under the school committee BEU contract. So you'd have to make an assumption about what it would be going forward, and you take the current. You take, let's say, assume somebody was in step 1 this year. You would take the current step 2 and inflate it, and if you're going to do it by 2.5%, as hypothetically, you would inflate the current step 2 by 2.5%, and that would be your assumed salary next year. Then for the year after that, you would take the current step 3 and inflate it by 1.25 times, I mean 1.025 times 1.025. So you compound that 2.5% to get to the year 3, step 3. And
I understand. I understand, but when we talk about forecasting salaries as a whole for the school, that's exactly what they're doing, right? And isn't it? They have to be doing essentially the same thing, or using an assumed inflation rate, a COLA figure, in this year going forward. So I'm just suggesting that that's an analysis that would be interesting to see, to come up and understand what that, what someone's income level actually would be after
I understand
15 years.
I understand what I completely understand what you're saying. We at this point, unless I have missed something, we don't know what assumptions were built in to the forecasts that we've seen.
We have all the individual steps in the contract, right?
We have the current steps, yes, but we do not know exactly how Dr. Gibbons
but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter for the question I'm asking. I'm actually not thinking about the forecast.
You're kind of focusing on the impact on the individual, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mariah?
2 things. I'm curious about why, Cliff, you were interested in someone coming in at step 1 and then like the rate of growth through, let's say, year 15, step 15.
I assume, I guess, that no one actually does that. But I really was just kind of curious what that would show in terms of someone's overall wage growth over that period. Relative to inflation, but also just sort of as a check, just to see where that individual would be relative to where, someone who's just joining the workforce, the same level, might expect to be in their career after 15 years. Because, the individual year information we have, steps that we have, they're significant. And it's really a question of how the whole thing looks over an extended period of time. Maybe it's as significant, maybe it isn't. And that's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay. I just as a point of data that you probably already know, but I'll just say this for anyone who doesn't. I believe PSB uses Master 6 as the average starting salary. And I say that just in the context that the PSB staff who are being hired aren't necessarily entry level. And that means not only are they coming in at a higher salary, but also they're topping off because they're not they're reaching the top steps sooner than 15 years. And so they don't access those steps year to year, just so everyone's aware of that.
So
context.
that's really good information, and we could use that, Master 6 as a starting point. But it's really just it's an intellectual exercise for me more than anything else. Someone coming in as a Master's 1 is going to be different maybe than someone coming in as a Bachelor's 1 over a 15-year period. And that's when, they'll all top out. I'm just trying to understand what it really looks like over the course of a career. That's all.
Okay. Jeff, did you have any questions or comments about this?
There we go. Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
Oh, just one little factual thing. I believe in Massachusetts, your chart, Dick, went all the way up to like bachelor step 15 or something. I believe in Massachusetts, you can't teach after a certain number of years, possibly, is it 3 or 5, without having a graduate degree. So for what it's worth, it might be less useful to present the higher steps of bachelor's.
I'm sorry, it might be useful to present the higher steps as bachelor.
No, not present bachelor's, because you can't, though the grid exists, I don't believe that there's anyone in those positions because they're not eligible to teach after a certain number of years. I can't remember if it's 3 or 5, but in that range with a bachelor's degree, you have to have a graduate degree.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about recommendation if, Dick, you think that that's viable given the data that you need to update as well.
Yeah, I certainly can. I will check the last comment, and I will include the 4852, Mariah.
Okay. Did you want to chat about the recommendation now or come back with a revised version of this? Would it change the recommendation that you're proposing? I guess
No, it wouldn't. I mean, I think the point is still there.
Yeah. All right.
So with those changes, I would move it.
Okay. So I actually have a question on the
Sure.
on the recommendation. So when you say here that PSB4, the select board shouldn't accept the current salary grid as a given starting point for the PSB forecast without requiring offsetting operating savings or increased non-tax revenues. Do you mean from within the PSB budget or overall?
This will be the select board's
Decision.
responsibility and their decision. Yeah. Which would be overall with, they could find it within the town, assign it to PSB, but this is really, I was trying to frame it in a way that alerted the select board to this issue,
Right.
with the recognition that it is not for us to make that decision.
Yeah, I think, and that was sort of what I was contemplating was the way that I read this document. It was an effort to raise awareness to the select board around the benchmarking, which again is incredibly helpful. So thank you for doing that. And I'm wondering what this looks like pragmatically, but maybe that's not for us to decide. Okay.
Can I
Mariah?
ask a question? I guess my question is the entire ERSC planning on making this comment generally for all unionized staff with steps? For example, are we going to say that there should be operational cuts in firefighters if they exceed 2.5% or 3%?
I don't think this explicitly says that that's where the cuts would be. I think what the recommendation here is that we shouldn't assume that the grid is a given.
Are we making that recommendation for all unionized grids?
I mean, I think this committee is making the recommendation for schools because that's our purview.
Right, but I'm asking the full ERSC committee. Do we think that on the town side that they are making that kind of comment?
I don't know.
I think it's a fair question.
I do. It is a fair question, and I don't know if they are or not.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Mariah, and it's a fair question. I don't know the answer to where the full ERSC will land. But my understanding is that steps on the town side amount to about $400,000 a year. It's a relatively small impact.
I think I'm thinking about the phrasing of this, and I don't have a better alternative phrasing of the recommendation, and that's why I'm pausing a little bit on this.
Okay.
I would need to think about it further. So I don't know if other people have feedback on the
You want to put off the vote and
Yeah, I think
I'm fine with that if you want.
I would prefer to do that if that's okay. I don't want to delay the overall process, but I also want to. I'd like to think about this a little bit more. Cliff, did you have any comments? You haven't said anything about the recommendation.
Nope.
Okay. Are you okay with the recommendation as it is, as it's framed right now? You're on mute if you were.
I'm a little stuck with the analysis that I want to do. So, look, if we're going to be reframing it and coming back, I don't think it really matters what I think right now. So,
Yep. Okay. All right. So then I think even more reason to just to delay a vote until next week. If you'll have additional questions after doing your own analysis. But okay.
yeah, if I can I need the full grid to actually do it. Do you have the full grid, Dick? You could forward it to me?
Yeah, I'll give you the full grid for this year, and you can layer on any assumptions you want.
Yeah, I mean,
forward.
It'll be pretty simplistic. I'm just curious.
Okay.
Okay.
No, please.
I did not have anything on the other issue of non-resident special education beyond what was distributed a long time ago. But I actually do want to pose a question, and that is that about 15% of our special education students are non-resident. What the analysis did early on was to look at the special education, the direct special education costs, not including capital, I think not including administrative oversight, just teachers, aides, transportation, and looking only at in-district costs, and it came out to about 4 million out of 28 million of those direct costs reflected the 15% of special education, of in-district special education students being non-resident, either METCO or materials fee. And my question would be whether there is any way, whether it is accurate to do that, or whether there is any way to say, no, the costs are actually less than that or more than that. But, all of those, or a majority of those costs, would be incurred anyway. And the kids are just tucked in where there is open space, or that analysis, basically looking at the per student average cost, is a reasonable way to look at it. And I would be curious as to whether there is any analysis out there that actually looks at this, that the schools have done. And I'm just not aware of any.
Mariah, do you know?
I believe that this was specifically asked in the FAQ, and staff said that they did not have this information. And
Okay,
I think the last time we talked about it, we talked about how you were using average cost as opposed to incremental cost as well.
right.
But
No,
what
and that's what I'm saying. And I guess my question is there any analysis that could arrive at an incremental cost? If I guess the point is that if it is 15%, which it is, of all of the in-district special education students, I'm wondering whether the average cost really does approach the long run marginal cost of doing that.
And I just, the in-district, like the range of cost is so wide, I can't, there's nothing immediately obvious to me to say how, without looking at IEPs, you could actually calculate cost, which is, I think, what staff was saying originally in their FAQ.
Okay,
Okay.
so what we have is
All right. So,
the
well,
average.
yeah. Sorry, were you done, Dick?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise that question before I put pen to paper on this.
Yep. All right, great. So then for next time, what we'll do is we will do we'll cover the non-resident special education. We will cover we'll do a follow-up discussion on the steps and lanes. I'm just writing this down. And then okay. So those will be the core things that we do. Is there, Mariah, coming out of the work that you shared today, the teaching loads, is there a recommendation that would come out of that? I know that this is largely, a component of collective bargaining. So we had talked about, and that's probably not something that we would cover as part of this committee, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you'd like to recommend coming out of either the teaching loads or the staffing question. I think there was an open question around benefits specifically for part-time staff. And I think that was, I think, Dick, that might have been something that you were going to look at, but I wonder if, it feels like there might be something there, but I also don't know the use cases around those staff, and it doesn't seem to be, the numbers don't seem to be as big as I had originally anticipated. So
yeah,
it might not be worth pursuing at all.
Yeah.
I think that those analyses were put together at the request of other committee members, so I certainly don't necessarily have an angle to them. I think that the one conclusion I would make for sure is what you said is, while there is part-time staff, again, it's used judiciously, and there's not like a vast number of staff that could be, so, so to speak, consolidated a 0.8 plus a 0.2 or something like that. And I don't have any particular thoughts on the workload analysis.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. All right. So, I know it's past 7. So we'll cover the topics I mentioned next week, and then we will bring Dick your document on the 11th on benefits or healthcare specifically to the full committee on the 11th, and this meeting that's coming up on the 4th is the documents that we had tried to approve last week. So the school model and the recreational rentals. So that's kind of what we have on the docket. We put together, Sergio and I have put together a kind of a revised calendar of what will happen when from a full committee standpoint. I'll share this. Let me share this with the group. So you can take a look at it. And I promise we will wrap after this. And then I also spent some time, I chatted with Chaz as well, just around the timeline for sharing with the select board. So the next, so obviously this is what we covered today, the school subcommittee, the full committee will cover recreation rentals, the school model, and then the solar initiative, something Sergio will cover. We will, actually, we're not covering teaching loads. We did that. So next week we'll talk about the steps and lanes follow-up, the non-resident special education. If Dick, you think that's viable for next Monday for our subcommittee?
Yes, I do. It will not be much beyond what you have seen at this point, I think already
Yeah,
some
that's
time
okay.
ago.
Yeah, that's okay. I want to make sure we have a conversation about the recommendation that comes out of that.
Yeah. Let me just add, assuming that things go as planned, I will be coaching at 3 o'clock next Monday. So I'll be at the New Balance facility in Brighton, but I suspect I will be able to make it. So
All right.
you might want to put me toward the end of the agenda just in case.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll plan on that. I think next week you might be the whole agenda for next week though. So, but
Okay.
if you think you're going to be late, we want to move the meeting 30 minutes back 30 minutes.
No, I've got I'll be communicating this week. So
Okay.
I will let you know.
Okay, that sounds good. So full committee meeting on the 11th, benefits, this will get moved. So I will move this to a later date, salary steps and lanes. So I will move this. And then and so we'll move, maybe on the 18th we can cover Dick those items. The special education funding as well as the salary steps and lanes, sort of optimistically. So that's what things look like at a high level, but obviously we'll see how next week goes.
Yeah, I would rather put it to bed rather than push it off, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that.
We start at 3 and we'll see.
Okay. All right. And then for everyone else, as well, just plotting our path to getting this report over the line. So extended the dates. We are expecting to have a weekly meeting for the full committee on Wednesday afternoons. We'll talk about it at the full committee meeting. And the request was to submit a report to the select board by the 13th of March. And then the subsequent select board meetings, we would present on the 17th, so have some time to digest it. There'd be public comment on the 24th of March, and then the goal would be to vote at the end of March on the 31st meeting. Okay, so that should be in line with some of the conversation we had with the full committee meeting on dates. So this got extended essentially in terms of the report submission by about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
Well, will you kindly send around this draft as you've amended it?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll discuss this with the full committee as well, but I wanted to make this group aware because for the
Thank
things
you
that-
very much.
Okay, no problem. All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. I know it was a long meeting. Thank you, and talk to you on Wednesday.
Bye.
All right, bye, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.